Just 12 months has passed since the T20 World Cup was last up for grabs. After years of failure, Australia managed to bring home the cup as underdogs in a UAE tournament that was largely impacted by the flip of a coin as much as it was by cricket itself. A lot has changed in T20 cricket since then, with numerous of the contending teams mixing their squads around in order to find the right mould ahead of the World Cup. In this preview, we are going to be looking at each team in this World Cup and assembling some tiers of how I think each team will fare in the tournament. First, we will look briefly at the teams who will probably not make it past the first round. Then we will look at the qualifiers, who are largely making up the numbers in the groups. After that, we will move into teams that could potentially make a run in the competition before heading into teams that would not surprise me if they won. And finally, we will then look at the favourites for the cup. Let's go. It feels as though this T20 World Cup is as true as we will ever get to having the best first round as possible when looking at the strength of teams. Because with the utmost respect to Oman and Papua New Guinea from last year, it did feel as though they were making up the numbers. Compare that to this year, and you could easily see one or two of the following teams making it through to the next stage of the competition. However, I think that more than likely, these four teams will not qualify for the World Cup proper. Ireland have been the most hit and miss of these teams this year. Some days they had respectable results against South Africa, India and New Zealand, and the next they were dropping games to the UAE and the USA. It just doesn't feel as though this year will be the one for Ireland to make the Super 12. I expect them to drop games against the West Indies and Zimbabwe and fail to make it through. Their game against Scotland is shaping up as the one to see who will win the wooden spoon of the group. The biggest issue for the men in blue is their lack of cricket played since their last World Cup, which was a major success for them, with their only time on the pitch being a two-match series against New Zealand earlier this year in which they got dusted. Scotland has the ability to show their skills in the shortest format, but like Ireland, will likely struggle to qualify from this strong group. Namibia were one of the feel-good stories of last year's World Cup, progressing through the first round after victories over the Netherlands, Ireland and Scotland, led by David Weese. Their 3-2 victory over Zimbabwe will no doubt also have them riding high on confidence heading into this World Cup. Despite this, I just feel as though the likely guaranteed qualification of Sri Lanka will put too much pressure on the side. Don't be surprised if they qualify over the Dutch, but for me I'm predicting them to fall short this time. The final member of the E tier is the UAE, who have been a vastly improved team since the last World Cup. Not only did they defeat Ireland 2-1, but they also won a quadrangular series in Oman. Things were looking up heading into the Asian Cup, until it all went horribly wrong, failing to qualify after losing to Hong Kong and Kuwait. They rebounded and competed well against Bangladesh not long after, however their results indicate that they will struggle to finish higher than last in their group. That's the end of the E tier, let's move up to the D tier. This set of teams are the ones that I think will be on the bottom end of the groups. They could easily win a few games in the tournament, however they simply don't really match up in the player strength when compared to other teams. The Netherlands are the team that I believe will be one of the most improved sides of this World Cup. Although never being among the top echelon of international teams, the Dutch are usually mainstays in each World Cup. And after failing at the last World Cup, they will no doubt be fired up and ready to make amends this time around. Although they struggled in their August tour of New Zealand, they have some firepower in their side, including the likes of Tom Cooper, Logan van Beek and 22-year-old Bas de Leede, who led the run scoring in the Kiwi tour. Expect the Dutch and Namibia to be battling hard for the qualification to the World Cup proper, however they should just edge the African side. From there, they should end up in Group 2, where they will likely struggle to get a win on the board. As mentioned before, Zimbabwe had a poor series against Namibia, which could have derailed all of their preparation for this event. We can safely forget about that, as Zimbabwe have been excellent in recent matches and series. Let's start simple. After losing 3-0 to Afghanistan, they went undefeated in qualification for the World Cup, albeit in a fairly weak group. They then beat Bangladesh 2-1 off the back of Sikandar Raz's batting display, and although it was in the ODI format, in Zimbabwe's most recent series they beat Australia in the final match of the series off the back of an awesome bowling display by spinner Ryan Burl. The team has a well-rounded bowling attack to go with its established core of batting leaders. I am very high on Zimbabwe for this World Cup, and I can say with confidence that they will progress through the qualification phase before potentially knocking off one of the bigger sides. On to Bangladesh. It would be a bit of an understatement to say that the Tigers have been a bit disappointing in recent times. Bangladesh were in the group of death at the last World Cup and they struggled because of it. Since then, their lone series victory was over the UAE, and they also failed to win a game in the Asia Cup. Mossadegh Hossain looked good in that tournament, however besides that, most of the team is struggling for form, and they will need to get some back in the trio series with Pakistan and New Zealand if they want to have any chance in this World Cup. Everything was going so well for Afghanistan during the Asia Cup. They beat eventual winners Sri Lanka as well as Bangladesh to win their group. That was until the Super 4 stage, in which the team struggled and fans began to rip the chairs off seats. There is still some hope for the team going into the World Cup. They performed fairly well in 2021, going the distance with some of the bigger sides and knocking off the qualifiers in the group stage. I see this World Cup as another chance for the side to grow and become more settled in international cricket. No doubt that the experience of Rashid Khan and Nabi will do their best to get the team through to the finals. However, I still think Afghani cricket needs some time to grow before they become a real threat in the World Cup. There is one last team that I'm going to place in this category, and before we get into them, I would need to express that this team could easily make me look very silly, and even while writing this down, I feel as though I may regret it. I have a feeling that the West Indies are going to really struggle in this World Cup. Let's start with the obvious. The West Indies will breeze through the qualification at the World Cup. Their team is leaps and bounds above the Irish, Scottish, and Zimbabwe. I also think the team looked okay against Australia, in particular the pace battery led by Azari Joseph. However, the team's batting is not very good. Every innings the Windies play starts well on the power play overs, before then petering out in the middle. And on some of the bigger grounds in Australia, that style of play will not suit them when playing against teams with quality spinners. They will wound up in Group 1, which is the weaker of the groups, so they could make me look like a fool, but we'll have to wait and see. And now we move on to the C tier. This tier is designated for teams who have a real chance at making the semis despite there being better teams in the comp on paper. However, I only have one side in this tier. It may be a bit harsh of me to have Sri Lanka this low on the list and below other teams that they beat in their successful Asia Cup campaign. I'm going to start with the negatives. Sri Lanka are overachieving drastically at the moment, which all in all is a good thing. Their team is in something of a rebuilding phase, with coach Chris Silverwood looking to his young talent to get the team into a strong place again. What they did at the Asia Cup was incredible, and I do not want to discredit that at all. However, I feel as though the team will maybe crash back down to earth in this World Cup. But enough about that. Let me tell you why Sri Lanka can conceivably win the competition. This team is so raw and fearless that it could easily upset some of the tournament favourites on any given day. They will come top of their qualification group, and those games will serve as a good warm-up for what is to come in the competition. The batting is in good form and handles pressure so well for a young team, and that comes from the group knowing that it can match with the best in the world. The bowling of Hasaranga is key for them. When he is on, he is one of the best bowlers in the world to get away. So Sri Lanka are a very good team. However, I just feel like there may be too many other good teams in this World Cup for them to deal with. Moving swiftly on, we are now up to the B tier, second from the top. These teams are all among the best in the world at the moment, and if they start well could easily make the semis and win the World Cup. However, I still think that each one has a few weaknesses they need to work through before they can be considered among the tournament favourites. It might still be disrespectful of me to put Sri Lanka below Pakistan, given that they only just beat them to win the Asia Cup. However, we need to put in the context how good Pakistan have been in this format over the course of the last year. In my opinion, Pakistan were the best team in the last World Cup until they eventually went down to Australia in the semi-finals. In addition, despite losing the Asia Cup, they still appear to have the mental toughness in their side instilled by their star batsman and captain Babar Azam. And adding to that, I can honestly say that he and Rizwan are still the best opening duo in T20 cricket at the moment, and they will be suited incredibly well to the pitches that Australia has to offer. Their bowling attack is very strong as well. They have the speed of Afridi and Rao partnered well with the deception of Shadab Khan and Mohammad Nawaz. The issue with Pakistan is mostly to do with their middle order, which can struggle when placed under pressure. The biggest threat to Pakistan overall is the strength of their group. They will be vying with India, South Africa and the Windies for a place in the final, but don't be surprised if they make it through. New Zealand are where they always are heading into ICC tournaments. Sitting firmly as underdogs and being hardly spoken about in comparison to the other top teams, despite making the final last time out. And to be honest, that's probably how the Kiwis like it, because time and time again they seem to produce in the group matches and remind everyone how good they truly are. Going into the tournament, the Kiwis have won their last 4 T20 series, however, they only now in the tri-series against Pakistan and Bangladesh are playing teams that are among the best in the format, having previously been playing a variety of associate nations. Drawing back to my opening sentence, the issue for New Zealand is that there are a number of killer teams in this tournament that the Black Caps don't have great records against, and to be quite frank, they were not overly inspiring when they last played India in November last year. New Zealand of course have many world-class players in Kane Williamson, Trent Boult, Martin Guptill and Ish Sodhi, and I reckon that generation of players may be playing close to their last T20 World Cup, so if they are going to win, this is their last chance. Also, keep a close eye on Daryl Mitchell, he could get the most runs in the competition. If I was to pick a smoky for the World Cup, that team would be South Africa. Yes, they have an awful record in ICC events, but this team is one of the best they have assembled in the format, and they have the record to back it up. After the disaster that was the last World Cup, South Africa have managed to rebuild to a point where they are firmly in the mix heading into the World Cup. They have a superb attack, spearheaded by Rabada and Shamsi, while their batting is stacked with players like Miller, De Kock, Klaassen and Rousseau, who have all learnt their craft on the domestic circuit for a number of years. If the Proteas were ever going to win the T20 World Cup, this is the year, with a good team and on pitches that will definitely suit them. They rolled England early this year in the format, before going down to India and still looking pretty good. The major flaw in South Africa's team at the moment is Temba Bavuma. Although an incredible leader and captain, he's immensely struggling for form and needs some runs at the top of the order, where starting fast is so critical. The team is once again in that tough group where they will be competing hard with India and Pakistan for a spot in the semis. Will the curse continue for the Proteas? Keep a close eye on them in this tournament, this could be theirs. On to the final team in this tier, Australia. This is a weird one for me because the signs always seem to point towards the Aussies having poor tournaments before they turn it around and rally in the actual competition. And honestly, I was very, very close to putting Australia in the tier above, but I then relented. The thing about Australia is going to be if every player plays to their full potential. Because I'm telling you now, if Maxwell, Warner, Stark, Zampa, Hazelwood and Tim David find form, the Aussies will be extremely hard to beat. However, there are just too many holes in this team. Aaron Finch is still out of touch, the attack can be a bit one-dimensional, and the team still struggles in the middle overs against the spinners. Overall, the team looked a bit scratchy against India and the West Indies, and honestly, like New Zealand, this competition feels a bit like the last dance for this generation of the Australian team, with the group more than likely going into the direction of the newer talent on the scene after this World Cup. Will Australia defend the title? In front of a home crowd, I give them a good chance, however they have many issues that the team will need to rectify in order to get the job done. And now finally we have two teams left who I think are most likely to get the job done, the favourite tier. Starting with England. England are looking really good on paper heading into this World Cup. Yes, there is no more Morgan and Bairstow, but when you look at the list of players, it is probably the best squad in the World Cup. And under the leadership of Matthew Mott, who I think is a sensational coach who knows Australian conditions, I can see this team succeeding. England are, besides Australia, the team best suited for the conditions of the pitches. Unlike last year's tacky surfaces where chasing was essential to victory, this World Cup will have fast tracks which will suit England's crash and bash style of play. The top order is stacked with big hitters, the middle order is packed with players who can finish off matches, while their bowlers are arguably the most skilled in the world. England's record heading into this World Cup is a little shaky, however, with their series win over Pakistan the only one they have won since the last World Cup. The biggest danger to the Poms will be if they drop a game earlier in the competition and get a bit rattled, as in that group, the team out of England, New Zealand and Australia that starts slow will ultimately miss out on qualification. Mark Wood will be the key for England. This World Cup is going to be heavily reliant on bowlers starting the innings off well, and I see Mark Wood's name right up there with the leading wicket takers. And finally, we have India. When I said there were two teams who I had as favourites for the World Cup, I may have been lying slightly. Because to be completely honest, this is India's World Cup to lose. Let's start with the negatives. India have really struggled in tournaments lately. Both the Asia Cup and last year's T20 World Cup were disasters for Indian cricket. Despite having undoubtedly the best team and the best tournament on the planet, India still seems to struggle in the big events. And with some players struggling for form and their best bowler out, should Indian fans be a little bit concerned? I think mostly not. India has the best batting lineup of the World Cup, hands down. When you get one player out, in comes another that is just as good and ready to pick up the slack. Just this year they have beaten South Africa twice, New Zealand, Australia and England in the format, and in a number of those have rested some of their best players. The only thing holding India back from winning this competition will be the pressure they and the nation place on the team. And whether they can withstand that throughout the competition will be essential to the World Cup. In terms of players to watch out for, take your pick, but Bhuvneshwar Kumar was elite in the Asia Cup, while Yadav is arguably the best T20 batsman in the world at the moment. Overall, India is my bet to break their drought and win the World Cup.